All right, thank you guys for coming tonight. People may be popping in a little bit later, but we're going to go ahead and get started. This is our first workshop for On the Same Page, Creating a Life You Love. And I am so grateful that you're here. I know there's tons of other things you could be doing tonight in the summer, and I am going to do my best to use our time well and efficiently so that you can get the most out of this and get on your way tonight. I am Melissa Havertz. I'm married to Matthew, and we've got 4 kids. We're in Davis County, and I am finishing my degree at Weber State University with the goal to become a family life educator with an emphasis in psychology. And one of the things I'm most passionate about is strengthening relationships, whether that's with yourself, with your children, your partner, roommates, or friends. But tonight we're going to be looking at it with the lens of a romantic relationship. But as you're thinking about these things, there are going to be things you can apply to other relationships as well. I sent an email earlier this week with a link video describing why these workshops were put together, but I'm going to do a quick recap of that to set the stage for tonight. So there's 2 main reasons why I'm doing it. The first one is I'm required to have teaching experience with my degree, but more importantly is I believe that the little tweaks that I'm going to be teaching about tonight have the power to improve and strengthen your relationships. So the idea for these workshops actually started to grow in my spring semester of college. Why I had 4 teammates. We surveyed over 250 women about their mental load and relationship satisfaction. And we found some pretty interesting information. First, over 90% of participants reported that they were either always or often thinking about what their families needed. And this was also reflected in what they were doing in their day-to-day tasks, all of which they reported doing more frequently than their partner, with the exception of dealing with the finances. And unsurprisingly, when participants reported that they had a high mental load, they were often also reporting a low relationship satisfaction. All this data is really interesting to me, but what I really latched onto is really encouraging. And that was when participants reported that they agreed about the division of labor in their home, they were also often reporting high relationship satisfaction. That made a lot of sense to me, and it led me to wonder what strategies we can use to have that agreement in our relationships, what leads to being on the same page with each other. I've always been interested in relationships, and I've informally gathered little bits in pieces of what contributes to healthy and happy relationships. And while in college, I've been learning about theories and practices that contribute to our happy family lives. And the workshops are going to be founded mostly on the research done for decades by Doctors John and Julie Gottman, as well as the work done in the past decade by Eve Rodsky. So I've taken their excellent research and information and tried to distill it into this workshop, On the Same Page, Create a Life You Love. And the goal is to help you in your romantic relationships have skills to create more emotionally intimate environments, better effectively communicate your needs, and better understand and share with each other your mental load. So quick disclaimer, I'm not a therapist. As a family life educator, I'm not qualified to provide therapy, but if that's something you feel like you would benefit from, I'd be happy to connect you to those types of professionals. Second, this is strengths-based. This isn't a place to bash yourself or your partner. I believe you, your partner, and your relationship overall has a lot of good, and this is just meant to enhance and strengthen it. And finally, you are the biggest factor in this being successful. You should have been emailed a PDF for taking notes, but if you don't have it, or if you can print it out, a piece of paper is great. And at the end of the workshop, or probably sometime tomorrow, I'll be sending you another email with some ways that you can apply what we've learned today. So how you apply what you learn is going to be what makes the biggest difference. Okay, thanks for letting me set the stage. The workshops are divided into 2 parts, and tonight we're focusing on that emotionally intimate environment. And then the second part is more practical tools, specifically with the mental load. So before we start, I'd love to take a minute to get to know who's on Zoom. And if you're comfortable, either to unmute or to just put in the chat to answer these 2 questions. First, what is something that you love to do? And second, what is something that you and your partner like to do together? So I'll go first while you're thinking about it. I recently have learned to really like working in the yard, especially caring for flowers and trying to make things look nice and not die. And something my husband Matthew and I like to do together is make music, usually him on the piano and me on on my flute. So I'll do in the order of people I see, if Martha would like to share anything about her and her partner.
Well, what I love to do is read and learn about new things. And what my husband and I like to do is similar to you. We love working out in the yard and and planning projects together.
Love that. Alexis, are you in a spot to unmute, or you can put it in the chat and I can read it?
Yeah, I can unmute. Let's see. Trying to think of things that I like to do. Sometimes it's hard to remember what I like to do. I love musical theater. So, and music in general. But yeah, and something my husband likes to do, my husband and I like to do, we like to read books together and talk about them and stuff. That's something we've enjoyed doing together.
Love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth, are you in a spot to unmute or comment?
Yeah. Yes to both. Let's see. Something I like to do. I'm with Melissa and Martha. I like to be in the garden, being outside. I have 6 tomato plants that I'm working on growing. So that's fun. I like to just go out there and like pull weeds and I like to be barefoot while I'm doing it so that I can kind of ground.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I like to do. Something my partner and I like to do together. We've recently picked up this new thing. It's called Finder Seekers. Has anyone heard of that? It's like a mystery. So they send you like it's like based off countries, right? So like the current one we're doing is Thailand. And so they send you like the packet and they ask you questions and they give you clues and you have to solve like the riddles or whatever. And I don't know, it's fun. I'm not describing it very good, but it's fun.
I love that. Is that's something you'd have to be able to communicate well with your partner? That's good. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so the goals for the end of this workshop, by the end of tonight, you will be able to identify bids for connection, brainstorm intentional rituals of connection, describe some fighting right principles, and have a plan to deal with emotional flooding. So we're going to start with the bid for connection, which the Gottmans describe as a fundamental unit of emotional connection. And these bids can look like a lot of different things. Some are verbal, like saying, hey, come look at this beautiful sunset, or it can be a little bit less obvious, like sighing as your partner walks by as you're doing the laundry. It could be smiling at your partner, touching their shoulder, sending a text. It's really anything that you do for connection that you're using to try and connect with your partner. So what comes to your mind when you think of bids for connection? Something that's helped me is to think of, what do my kids do when they want my attention? Sometimes, you know, the talking, but what comes to your mind when you think of bids? You can either put it in the chat and I'll read those aloud if you're in a better position to type than to talk. But I'd love some of your ideas. And there's a spot on the PDF if there's anything that stands out to you that you feel like you would like to write down. Oh. I don't know if you're talking, Julia, but hello.
Now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I had to fix my computer. I said that my 6-year-old will every night ask for a scratch back. My kids want their back scratched every night.
I like that.
And I'm sorry, I came late. Are you asking about kids or partners?
Oh, partners usually, but I did say that kids sometimes, I think sometimes easier to see it with kids. Martha says, my partner likes being funny, hollering to me. For example, where's my gal? All right. So how we respond to these bits of connection, so anything that our partner is trying to connect with us with, how we respond to those is really important. And the Gottmans have divided it into 3 types of ways we can respond. The first one is turning away. So we're going to use an example of your partner saying, oh, I had a really rough day at work. Turning away might be completely ignoring it. Maybe you're looking at your phone or just go, and don't really give any response back. Turning against is responding with hostility or negativity. It can often lead to conflict or feeling rejected. So in response to them having a rough day, you might say, you think you had a hard day? I was up all night with our baby. You don't have any room to complain. And finally, turning towards is when we acknowledge and respond positively to that attempt to connect. So maybe it's looking at them and saying, tell me more, what happened? So we're all very imperfect at responding to bids for connection. And on your notes, either again on the PDF or on a piece of paper, and we're going to take a couple of minutes to reflect on when we are the most likely to turn away, against, and towards. So a couple of thoughts for you to think about are there certain times when you recognize that you turn away? Is it maybe when you're on your phone, when you're tired? Do you turn against when you're interrupted? I think that's when I'm easily irritated if I'm interrupted in something, or if you're in a bad mood. And when are you most likely to turn towards? And do you see any patterns? So I'll give maybe a minute or two to write about that. And I have room to improve as well, so I will be documenting this myself. We've got a comment I'll read. It says, I've noticed that if I'm listening to something, I don't hear him as well, and sometimes not at all. Now I try to take my earbuds out if I hear him coming. I can go back later to catch up. That's very good. All right. Hopefully you've had enough time. If I move too quickly, feel free to stop me. We'll go on to our next part. So our goal is to turn towards our partners frequently as possible. And in their years of studying couples, the Gottmans have discovered that high functioning, what they call as experts of relationship couples, turn towards bids of connection 86% of the time. Whereas couples who have high conflict, it usually drops down to about 33% of the time turning towards their partner's bids for connection. So I really liked Martha's comment of taking out their earbuds so that you can hear. But what can we be doing better? Something I've thought about is making sure I have a time where I don't have my phone, so that I am not, it's so easy for me just to be like scrolling on social media and kind of half listening to a conversation, but trying to be more intentional, actually putting the phone away and talking to my husband. Does anyone have any other ideas of things that they can do to be better at catching the bids for connection and turning towards them?
I have one. If I don't know, I'm trying to decide if it's really qualifies or not, but I've realized that I tend to like think through things really quickly because I have all day to think through them. And my husband, like, I'll bring something up and he'll have to think about what I'm talking about, and then and he likes to like come up with his response before he says it out loud. He's like a very internal, and I've learned that I need to give him time, or else I just start like, why aren't you responding? What do you like? And start like just kind of rolling over him with all of my thoughts because I've already thought it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I've learned that I need to give him time to think about his thoughts and come up with his response and then respond. So I don't know if that counts, but I've learned that I am able to turn towards him and really connect with him more when I try to respond in the way he needs and not just the way I need.
Yeah, I really like that. I think also noticing like how much time they have to respond is important too. What's the context? When can we give that bid? Which yeah, I really like that. Let's see. Martha said, I used to have to consciously look my kids in the eye when I responded to them. I noticed today that I often keep doing whatever I'm doing while answering. I think that's really easy to do too. I think, especially if we were busy, we have things to go, but taking that time to look at your partner is very good. And again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these things that we're going to talk about are applicable to other types of relationships too, whether it's your children or a coworker. But our relationship with our person, our partner is, I think, one of the most important ones to focus on. Does anyone have any other insights to share? I need to be better at making the choice to prioritize people and not activities or things. Oh, that is so hard. I think for me, that's one time I turning against, I get really irritated if I'm in the middle of something and I feel like I have to get pulled away. Again, with my partner or with my children, I think that's really easy to get frustrated with. So I think I have room to improve there. Something to consider too is maybe you feel like you do respond pretty well to bids, but your partner doesn't. And the Gottmans have something they refer to as fuzzy bids. Like, for example, if you're like sighing while you're doing laundry, hoping that they'd notice and offer to help, or hoping your partner notices if you're looking at them flirtatiously. We want to do a better job at giving clear bids if we're wanting to connect. Okay, I see Martha says moving closer when we interact, touching a shoulder or arm when talking. I really like that too. Now, the goal is to catch as many bids as we can or turn towards the bids, but it's not realistic to expect to do 100%. We're never going to catch all of them. But if we can set intentional time to connect, which the Gottmans refer to as rituals of connection, that percentage, that 86% of turning towards is much more likely to be achieved. So a ritual connection, according to the Gottmans, is a regular activity or routine that couples use to feel closer and have a stronger emotional bond. So these rituals are meaningful and they give a chance to connect, and they can be small daily things, bigger, less frequent activities. But the important thing is that they're done on purpose and that both of the people in the partnership enjoy it. So it can look like a lot of things. The Gottmans have a lot of really good examples, and here are a few of them. So there's rituals of reunion. They recommend a 6-second kiss or a 10-second hug when you both get home. Celebrations, like if you have certain ways that you celebrate. My husband and I, for years, do Panda Express for any milestone, like when we got married or had a baby, a work promotion. When there's something we're celebrating, we get Panda Express. Showing appreciation. Maybe at night you tell them something that they did that helped you feel loved or something you love about them. You can have rituals around waking up and going to bed, like eating breakfast together, talking about your days you get ready, or holding hands for a few minutes as you're about to fall asleep. You can also have cues around sexual intimacy. Maybe you've communicated that a specific touch means that you're initiating going to the bedroom, or have a day in the week where you've set aside time to have more of a physical intimacy. A weekly date or yearly trip that you can count on is another great way. And I think it's really easy to think of these big things to connect, but Dr. John Gottman encourages what things you can do frequently. His motto is to do small things often. And along those same lines, happiness expert Gretchen Rubin says, what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. So those big connections like celebrations or yearly trips are fantastic. But again, it's the small things that often have a really great impact. Okay, so I'd love for you to spend another minute or two thinking of maybe things you're already doing. I think sometimes we feel like we need to add more, but we are doing things. So even just writing and putting pen to paper on the plan that you already are doing can give it more power. But you could also brainstorm if there's something that you would want to try or be a little bit more intentional on for your rituals of connection. Feel free to keep working on that. We're going to take a 2-minute break. I'm going to get myself a drink of water. If you need to use the bathroom or get a snack or check on crying children, feel free to do that, and we'll be back in just a minute. All right, if you don't mind giving me a thumbs up or something on the chat to show me if you're ready for us to move to our last half of our workshop for tonight. Okay, Lex is ready.
I ran to talk to my partner. And I'm like, I couldn't think about it, but here are a couple things. One he likes that I do, and that is he has to have eye drops in his eyes to reduce the pressure in his eyes. And he has a hard time getting them in himself. So every night right before we go to bed, he lays on the recliner and I drop his eye drops in. And to him, I didn't think that up. He's like, that is a good connection and it helps him and makes him feel loved. For me, he tells me, like, I just painted some cupboards and I wasn't sure if I really liked them. And he's like, oh, I think they look great. And he's told me numerous times. He's repetitive. He likes things to be repeated. We're kind of back to child behavior, maybe a little, but nice to know.
I really like that. I think that's a great idea to maybe ask your partner what you're already doing. That means a lot because sometimes you didn't really consider eye drops being a big connection, but there are often things we're doing without really giving it, naming it. So I think that's a great idea.
We're doing better than we think.
Mostly, I would say we usually are. Okay, so the first part we've talked about building that emotional closeness, but it's important that we recognize not every conversation or interaction is going to be smooth or necessarily positive. We're going to encounter conflict, and so covering conflict is our next part of tonight. So Dr. Julie Gottman says, when couples are in conflict, that is not a bad thing. And in her and her husband, Dr. John Gottman's 2024 TED Talk about fighting right, she asked, how often do you hear things like, I had a great fight the other day? Or, oh yeah, my partner and I fight all the time and we're super happy. And I don't know about you guys, but I have never heard that ever. So what do you think about her quote that fighting is not a bad thing? What feelings usually come up for you when you think about conflict? I am naturally a conflict avoider. I get sick to my stomach if I am anticipating conflict or I sense conflict coming up. So what about you guys? What are your initial reactions when you think about conflict? Again, feel free to unmute or put it in the chat, whichever you prefer.
It makes me thinking about it, makes me feel really uncomfortable. I am naturally a conflict avoider too. But I work with someone who we had a conversation once about the dynamic of our team and how it can be very frustrating to be in kind of like a political environment where you don't want to say the wrong thing to the wrong people. And she said that her husband, she and he both work from home. And so she could hear some very heated conversations and lots of conflict with him sometimes and his team. So she talked to him about it, like, what's going on? Why every Friday do I hear yelling? And they have like, I can't remember what she said it was called, but on Fridays, they like take all the walls down. They can have free speech Friday, say whatever you're feeling. And for them, it was very helpful. And granted, like, that's a whole bunch of men working together. That is not my style at all. I don't know if it's just because I'm not a man, but since talking to her about that and learning that their team is so much more productive, that they care about each other's feelings, but they also really care about moving things forward and improving things. And so they choose not to be offended and choose to focus on improving themselves and what they're doing. So sorry, that's kind of long-winded, but bringing it to a personal relationship, we have to choose to be open to feedback or criticism and not get upset about it, and make sure our partner or spouse feels the same way, that we can have honest, direct communication, knowing that our ultimate goal is the same, to improve our relationship and our family dynamic.
Yeah, I really like that. The Gottmans talks about how women who do fight with their partner often have healthier relationships. If a woman feels safe enough to bring up concerns and have conflict in a relationship, if it's done right, which we'll talk about more, that's actually a very good sign in relationships. Relationships that don't have any conflict are often not a very deep relationship, because you're never going to get two people who agree on everything. So if there's never conflict, there's probably someone who might be self-silencing and not sharing what's really part of what's going on in their life. Is there any other comments? Let's see, Elizabeth says she is a conflict avoidant too. We are in good company. Yeah, well, there's many people who say they really love conflict, but there are people who I think are a bit more comfortable.
I do not
Yes.
avoid conflict. I don't like, I don't know, like, I don't like, I'll like you said, I don't enjoy conflict. I'm like, not like, hey, this is gonna be great. But I don't do well bottling it up, and I just get more frustrated and everything. So I'm kind of one of those, like, let's just get this over with type people. But I do like when you talked about like that fighting's not a bad thing. I didn't think about my spouse as much. But I thought about on my mission, I had, different companions, and the two that I am the closest with and felt like I was the most connected with are actually the two that we actually fought, because we actually communicated instead of just like getting through the day.
Yeah.
Each other, like, let's just, like, ignore each other's flaws and just get through this. We actually worked on things together. And so that's what made me think of, like, my closest friends are usually the ones that I can approach a problem with. Then that I'm not afraid of approaching a problem with, I guess. So.
That's a great insight. I really like that. So I think we've kind of hit this a little bit, but conflict is connection. It's how we bridge our differences and find our similarities. The problem is we haven't been taught how to do it right. So we're going to be talking a bit of some of the principles from this book by the Gottmans, and it came out just this year, so it's pretty new, but it's really building on all the research that they've been doing for decades. These are just some of the topics in their book, which we will not be covering all of them, but I do want to highlight something that Dr. John Gottman said about prevention. He said, people wait an average of 6 years to get any kind of help once they discover there's a problem in the relationship. We get 3 times the effect size when we try to prevent problems than when we intervene when problems have already developed. So get help early and find somebody who is really competent to help. So prevention can look like a lot of things. What we're doing tonight is prevention. Family life education in general is preventative. But again, if there's things that therapy would be helpful for, is much better. Okay, what does effect size mean? So from my understanding, it's you're going to have 3 times the success rate or improvement when you're doing it preventative than when you're trying to come in to intervene. Does that make sense? I kind of see it as like getting a dental cleaning is going to be a much better approach than if you just wait and have worse. Being preventative and preventing it from getting worse is going to have a healthier and better effect than trying to fix something that's broken. Which again, you should. If it is broken, don't think you're past hope. But if you can catch it early, it's going to have a much higher success rate of improving. Does that answer your question? Ish. Okay. So what we're going to cover tonight are golden ratios, soft startups, statements of positive need, and emotional flooding. These are all going to connect to each other very well. So first is golden ratios. So these ratios explain the balance between negative interactions and positive interactions. So when couples are in conflict, there should be 5 positive interactions for every negative interaction going on. And then during our normal day-to-day interactions, this increases to 20 positive interactions for every negative one. And I listened to a podcast episode with Dr. John Gottman, and the host said, can I just like front load it with a lot of positive interactions and then not worry about those positive interactions during conflict that we can just like butt heads? And he laughed and he's like, that might feel easier, but healthy relationships have that positive ratio of 5-to-1 during conflict. And these are important because it helps create that atmosphere where we can compromise and work together. So it could be hard to think of positive interactions when you're in conflict, but Dr. Gottman says that they can be really simple. They can look by nodding. These things would count as a positive interaction, like nodding your head, showing you're listening by looking at them in the eye, saying things like, that makes sense that you'd feel that way. That's a good point. Having your hand on their hand, a lot of little things can help with conflict. He also says being able to have a sense of humor is a very powerful tool when you have conflict. And if you think about that 20-to-1 ratio for just day-to-day interactions, that goes back to our bids for connection. When we are turning towards our partner, those are building up that 20-to-1 ratio. And this has been really helpful for me in my relationship with my partner, but again, with my kids too, that if I can have positive interactions with that ratio, things are a lot more likely to go well. So let's say you're in conflict. Again, it's not if we fight that determines a relationship success, it's how we fight. So Dr. Gottman says, this is Dr. John Gottman, the real test is, can you talk to your partner even in those really sour moments when you're not happy, where you're upset? Is your partner there for you? It's really that simple. So we're going to talk about softening our startups, which this has been really impactful for me as I've been learning this and using it. I've seen a really big difference. So I think this is something that can be really beneficial with conflict. So we're going to imagine that you've been cooking dinner every night for weeks and weeks, and your partner hasn't been helping, and you have started to get really upset about it. So there are several ways that you could start this conversation. The first is by criticizing, blaming it on the character flaw of your partner. You never help with cooking, and I'm tired of you being so lazy. Or you could have contempt, which gives you a sense of superiority. Of course, I'm stuck doing the cooking again because I actually plan things. Or these harsh startups usually will lead to a negative response like defensiveness, like I would cook more if you didn't constantly tell me I'm doing it wrong. Or stonewalling. They don't say anything, they give you the silent treatment, or they totally withdraw from the conversation, which is my personal preference of how I respond when I feel attacked, which is not good, but those are often how we respond when we have a harsh startup. So we're going to take the same scenario and use the Gottman's principles for a softened startup. And it starts by first expressing your feeling. You may have heard of I statements before, and that's right along the lines of what this is. So you might start by saying, I feel so burnt out. And then next, you're going to state the situation or what you're noticing. So notice you're not going to be talking about the behavior of your partner. You don't say, I feel so burnt out because you never help me. Soft startups are focused on you, your situation, and your feelings. So you could say, I feel so burnt out from cooking dinner every night. And then finally, you're going to give a positive statement of need. It's a solution or something that would help. So again, it's not attacking your partner. You don't say, I feel so burned out from cooking dinner every night. I need you to stop being so lazy. It could look like, I feel so burnt out from cooking dinner every night. I'd really like to get takeout tomorrow. Or will you please take over this weekend? When you use a softened startup and express a positive need, you're giving a way for your partner to shine. I really liked that. Giving them a way to actually succeed rather than to feel defensive or like they're under attack. And you're giving them a way to meet your needs. And that can be really hard in the moment to do. It's something I think you need practice in. It's really easy to do a knee-jerk reaction when you're upset. But I'd love to workshop a couple of scenarios if you think of any. You're welcome maybe to put it in the chat. That might be an easier way to make sure I don't miss anything. A personal example I could give is my husband has some time off this summer, and he was talking about all the things that he was wanting to do. And in my brain, I was like, hello, I'm right here. I have things I want to have happen in the summer too. And I'm afraid you're going to have so much that you want to do. My needs aren't going to be met. And that was in my mind. But I'd been studying this stuff. So I was just like, I am feeling nervous about all the things I need to get done this summer. Could we figure out a way that we could divide the time so we can make sure that we're both getting what we want? And that led to a really good solution that has been very successful. And I mentioned to him, I was like, hey, look, I did a software startup. It would have been much worse if I had said, you're only thinking about yourself. Why aren't you thinking about me? And we had a good conversation. He's heard all of these things because I've been studying it. But I've noticed that when I soften the startup and give a solution and something to do, things are much better. So are there any things that you guys would like to workshop for a minute?
Melissa, will you go back to that your slide
Yeah, here
that
I've
you
got.
didn't get the last?
Would that be helpful?
Yeah. So
Okay.
thanks.
Yes. Yep. State how you feel, describe the situation in a positive need.
I have one back before our break when we were thinking of connection rituals and what our partner would like and what we would like. In my mind, I kept just feeling like, well, what I would love from my partner is to help relieve my stress burden, but that is very much not what my partner would need. My partner would feel much more connection. Well, and the reason for that is sometimes I feel like I can't connect because I'm stressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's me. That's how I'm feeling. That doesn't mean that that's how my partner is feeling. So stating how I feel very stressed. I'm doing all of these different things, and a positive need might be, I don't know, because we're workshopping how this could go. I don't know if this is really the direction we want it to go, but my thought is the positive need from that would be, I want to connect with you. I'm feeling so stressed that it's preventing me from taking the time to focus on you and me and just getting away. I need to get away from my stressors so that I can focus on you instead.
I love that. Yeah. So maybe you're saying, it seems like overall you're feeling maybe disconnected and stressed. You're saying, I'm feeling stressed and disconnected from you, from all the pressures I have going on at work or at home or, whatever that situation is. And maybe, do you have something in mind, like, could we schedule a date night, or do you have something in mind that would be something that you could do?
Yeah, maybe find a babysitter and just have time with the two of us.
Yeah, I really like that. I think you got how you feel, the situation, and then something that you need. Okay, any other things that we could workshop? One that I don't know if this is something, I was trying to brainstorm things that maybe could be helpful. I don't know if running late is something that could be stressful. If maybe you are more on time and your partner tends to be running late, you could say, I'm feeling really frazzled when we are late for, I don't know, our kids' soccer game every Saturday. I've been noticing that we tend to be late to the soccer game. Could we set an alarm on our Alexa at this time to make sure everyone's getting going? Something like that. Is there any other pressing matters that might be helpful as a group to work through? Okay, I will keep going, but if you want, I love doing this. If you want to brain dump anything with me, feel free to email me or contact me if it's helpful to have someone to bounce ideas off of. So we're going to do our final topic of tonight, which is the concept of emotional flooding, which is similar to the concept of fight, flight, or freeze, if you're familiar with that. Dr. John Gottman says, when we're flooded, we can't think straight, we can't listen very well, and we certainly can't creatively problem solve. So sometimes we are in conflict in such a way that we just cannot think straight or respond very well. And these are some signs that you might be emotionally flooded. So as I've been studying this, I realized that this happens a lot for me with my interactions with my kids. The other day I was feeling really stressed out, and one of my kids ate a popsicle on the couch, which they weren't supposed to do, and got popsicle juice all over. And I snapped at her and I said, that is the last time you're ever eating a popsicle. And obviously I do not really mean that, but I jumped to a really strong thing I didn't mean. And I've noticed at other times, even with my partner, if I have really strong emotions or I'm feeling emotionally flooded, I'm saying things I don't really mean. Other things are raising your voice, interrupting your partner, feeling out of breath. One thing I think is really interesting is you could stonewall, like you could not be responding at all, but your heart might be racing. That could be a sign that you're emotionally flooded. So the Gottmans recommend dealing this way with emotional flooding. And the first is to recognize that you're experiencing it or your partner's experiencing it. And then having a phrase that you both know means that you need to stop the conversation. Then once you've stopped, you need to plan a time to come back. It's really easy, especially if we're conflict avoidant, to like kind of push it under the rug and hope things just kind of settle over time. But they recommend spending at least 20 minutes away, but no longer than 24 hours before coming back to talk about it. And they disagree with the adage of don't go to bed angry. They say sometimes you need to get some sleep so that you can function again. But I know some couples, they just can't sleep if they feel like they're head to head with each other. So maybe taking that 20-minute break to calm down and then come back and work on it. And then this is the most important part, is during your break, you need to do something to get that emotion and that adrenaline out of your body. It could be going for a walk, baking something, taking a nap, watching a funny video. But the most important, and for me, the hardest part, is not to stew over what's getting you upset. You don't want to be thinking, oh, this is what I should have said, or this is what they said to me, and I think they're such a jerk. You need to get those feelings flooded out of your system. And then once you've spent that time away that you've agreed upon, you come back and hopefully you're both in a calmer and kinder state. But if you catch yourself getting emotionally flooded again, you can repeat the cycle. But if you notice that this is happening often, that could be a good indication that you might want to have some more professional skills or professional help to get the skills to help with your emotional flooding. So something for our final exercise on our note-taking activity, I would love for you to write down ways that you can recognize when you're emotionally flooded, and then maybe a couple of things that you could do that would help get your mind off of it. So we'll take a minute to do that. Susie. Actually, before we move on to that, I would love if any of you have any ideas, maybe we could share with each other ways that you can regulate yourself. One that has been new for me is I have the app of ChatGPT on my phone. And the most recent time that I felt like emotionally flooded, I ended up talking to ChatGPT about something. I was asking about the health benefits of gardening versus speed walking, because I was trying to decide which I wanted to put more time into. And so I got my mind onto a different conversation, and that actually was very helpful for me to kind of put a pause in my brain of the negative thoughts I was thinking and get my mind onto something else. I often clean when I'm upset, and that kind of gets some of that energy out. Feel free to put in the chat or share if you have any thoughts of things that help you to calm down when you feel that emotional flooding.
I'll share just real quick. I also clean. I mentioned at the beginning that I like to go outside barefoot, and as I tend to my tomatoes. But that's also walking around outside barefoot helps me to just get out of my head and stop. So
Mm-hmm. I like that. I don't know if you guys have seen Emperor's New Groove, but she gets, Julia says, I clean something, take a nap, have a alone time in some way. I like that. Yeah, in Emperor's New Groove, she gets angry at something going on and she goes, oh, I need to clean something, which has been helpful. I like that, having time alone in some way. All right. Well, we have done a lot. Hopefully you're feeling like you, oh, let's see. Martha says, sometimes I just need a longer processing time to make decisions, especially when it's something fun my partner wants to do. I finally learned to ask for it. That's really important. I think Alexis kind of mentioned this too, that her husband needs a little bit more time to think through things before responding, and that maybe you're not emotionally flooded per se, but you just feel like you're maybe not in a state to really think through things yet, and that you need a little bit more of a space before you address maybe whatever you're talking about. I think that's a very good thing to recognize. Okay, we've covered a lot. Thank you so much for sticking through with all of this. I hope you're feeling like this is beneficial, that you can identify bits for connection, have some ideas of things you might like to try, and some tools to use for when conflict or conversations get tough. So I'm going to email this probably tomorrow morning or afternoon, this application assignment of ways to use what we talked about tonight. So the first one is to write out those rituals of connection that either you or your partner, ideally both of you, would really like, and then just pick one and have a plan to implement it. And remember, the small things are important, not necessarily planning a huge date night every week, but maybe that little thing of talking at night together. The next one is to think of maybe one conflict that may come up more frequently for you, or something that's been on your mind, to write it out as a softened startup. And I'll have the instructions for that. Again, I feel, situation, and a statement of positive need. And then finally is to brainstorm phrases that you could use to say when you're emotionally flooded. Something my husband and I say to each other and to our kids is, I'm turning into a rattlesnake. That's a quick image. Or I feel like a volcano, like, okay, I'm about to erupt, I need to settle down. But that can use it to have that indication that you need to pause. So thank you so much for your time. In addition to that assignment, I'll send you a reference sheet from tonight's material. If there's anything you want to deep dive into, there's going to be a lot of resources there. So feel free to email me if there's any topic in particular that you want more information on. And I'm excited to see you in a couple of weeks. I will stop recording, but thank you.